Hello kings, queens, and majesties, welcome to WhaleStat. I am Sliceable Otaku, and it is time that we revisited Eula and make an updated guide for her. Now we've talked about this character before on the channel, but even still, I want to make this video for a few reasons. For one, of course with update 2.3, we've had the return of Eula and Albedo, which means plenty of new Eula havers may have questions about her kit and how to use her, which I feel I can help out with. Truly, this very first two character rerun pairing has WhaleStat written all over it because these are two characters I would happily go to bat for and champion. Secondly, I feel like enough has changed around Eula to warrant some additional points of interest that not everyone may be aware of. And finally, Eula is easily one of my most used and reliable characters. If I'm using her, I have absolutely no fear of anything, and I would love that to be the case for plenty of you. We will of course be taking a look at Eula's talents, passive skills, optimal artifacts, weapons, constellations, and team compositions, all of which you can find timestamps for on the video and in the description. And be sure to stay tuned for even more content from WhaleStat, as we will be doing the very same for Albedo with another video soon to follow. Alright, so when it comes to Eula's normal attack, she is truly more of a physical character than she is a cryo one, and so you'll be swinging at your enemies a whole lot. Now truthfully, Claymore users for me at times can feel a bit slow or clunky with their normal attack animations, but Eula is a dancer. Her movements are fluid and swift and slide right into her elemental skill incredibly, which is very, very important for us. That being said, I don't think I ever use her heavy attack, but that just might be a me thing. The only Claymore character I tend to use heavy attacks with is Noelle. But moving on to her elemental skill, Ice Tide Vortex is a cryo-infused slash that upon hitting an opponent provides us with what is known as a stack of Grimheart, of which we may have a maximum of 2. And these stacks increase Eula's defense by 30% a pop and provide a bit of interruption resistance, which is huge. This is part of what makes Eula scary because it makes her an unrelenting force hellbent on getting her revenge. Now I will say it can be easy to get carried away with this because when enemies fail to knock you over, you may end up neglecting your health, but hey, the defensive buff here is a nice cushion in that sense. However, you can also hold her elemental skill to consume your stacks and deal cryo damage in an AoE as a maximum of 2 swords slam onto the ground. And if you're consuming stacks of Grimheart, that will reduce both the physical and cryo damage resistances of those hit for 7 seconds. These reductions range between 16% and 25% depending on the level of your skill, and honestly that physical damage reduction is more important than that cryo reduction. However, all of this is preliminary. The main event comes in the form of Eula's elemental burst, Glacial Illumination. Eula swings forward with cryo damage, which then results in the creation of a Lightfall sword that lasts for 7 seconds. And from there, every normal attack and elemental skill from Eula herself charges the sword with a stack up to a maximum of 30. And once those 7 seconds are up, the Lightfall sword drops and nuclear fallout ensues, dealing an unreal amount of physical damage. Now with enough stacks and enough skill levels, almost nothing survives this damage outright. With that being said, I sometimes run into the issue, if you can even call it that, where Eula kills everything on screen so fast that there is nothing for the sword to hit. However, you can always drop the sword preemptively by switching characters while it is in the air, which is definitely a time saver once you get a feel for the character and can accurately predict how much damage an enemy can sustain. Truly, this burst is so powerful that I believe it may very well be the reason why bosses like Agedaha, Magokenki, and the Abyss Heralds are health gated, because otherwise you could barely call them fights. Eula is to me the damage equivalent of Zhongli. I truly cannot stress this enough, if used correctly she trivializes the entire game. My Eula is Constellation 6, but that is because I really like her. Either way, C0 or not, Eula is terrifyingly powerful and more often than not sees bigger damage numbers than any other character in the game. It is actually crazy to me that anyone would undervalue this character given all that she has been proven to do, but it is what it is. Moving on to her passives, Roiling Rhyme is really great, as if we opt to consume 2 stacks of Grimheart with our elemental skill, we pretty much get a mini version of her burst to immediately drop. Now granted, this is half of the base physical damage of her Lightfall sword, but makes leveling her burst all the more imperative and worthwhile. From there, we have Wellspring of Warlust, which makes it so that when we use Eula's elemental burst, the cooldown of her elemental skill is reset, and we also gain an additional stack of Grimheart. Now this should influence how we time our ability use. You'll want to press her elemental skill to gain a single stack, use her burst, gaining you a second stack, hold her skill for the roiling rhyme damage, and then go crazy building that Lightfall sword. With a level 1 burst alone, we are looking at a 183% damage roiling rhyme, which is crazy. Now think about the 337% you'll be dropping at level 9 in tandem with the 4,133% you would see from a complete stack of 30 if you can achieve it. That is unreal. This is truly such a well-composed character. Now mind you, it is pretty hard to get to that 30, but you really don't even need that. 20, 10, any of that is enough to do some crazy damage. From there we have aristocratic introspection. When Eula crafts character talent materials, she has a 10% chance to receive double the product. What is interestingly enough the same sort of crafting passive as Albedo, which is really useful to possess. In regards to talent priority, you'll want to aim for her burst first and foremost, followed by her normal attack and conclude with her elemental skill. But that's it for her talents. It is time for us to move on to her constellations. At Constellation 1, whenever Grimheart stacks are consumed, Eula's physical damage is increased by 30% for 6 seconds, with each stack increasing the duration by 6 seconds up to a maximum of 18 seconds, which is pretty incredible. If you properly manage your rotations with this character, you are looking at a damn near constant buff to physical damage, which is our bread and butter here. So if you like more damage and have the funds, it isn't a bad constellation to pick up at all. At Constellation 2, we have such an incredible quality of life change as the cooldown of Eula's held elemental skill is reduced to be identical to that of her press. This makes particle generation faster, therefore affording you her burst more often. Not to mention, it makes her already silky smooth movements that much smoother as things now glide together perfectly. I would say if you are loving Eula and are interested in dipping into constellations, this is most definitely a phenomenal stopping point. Now Constellation 3, however, is a point usually skipped over in most guides as it is the same for all characters, an additional 3 levels to the elemental burst. What is more valuable to certain characters more so than others, but man oh man, on a nuke button like Eula, this is crazy. You really don't need to be this lethal, but hey, big numbers are nice I suppose. Constellation 4 is yet another buff to damage as Lightfall swords deal an additional 25% damage to opponents below half health. It's kind of like having a variant of Wolf's Gravestone's ability. Mind you, this also applies to the Shattered Sword of her held elemental skill. Yet another damage increase, but not nearly as insane as the previous. It's still pretty cool though. Constellation 5 doesn't matter much to us as it is mostly just a buff to her cryo damage, which we honestly don't care about. Eula truly might as well have a physical vision instead of a cryo one at this point. And then we have the glorious Constellation 6. Lightfall swords from Eula's elemental burst start out with 5 stacks as opposed to none, and all of her attacks have a half chance to provide an additional stack. Friends, this is so much damage you won't even know what to do with it. Nuking becomes way too easy. Again, I do in fact have Eula at C6, but that is far from necessary. I just like her that much. She is a damn good DPS carry at C0 regardless, but now let's move on to her weapons. We'll begin with her signature weapon and generally her best in slot, the Song of Broken Pines. This thing is awesome. The substat of physical damage is just what we need to make our numbers even better across the board, and thanks to its ability, Eula has her attack further increased by 16%. Not to mention that when normal or charge attacks hit opponents, which should be in theory constant, we gain a sigil of whispers, of which there are a maximum of 4. And once you hit that 4, they will all be consumed for 12 seconds, grant the entire team a buff, which increases normal attack speed by 12% and even further increases attack percent by 20. From there, we have an 8-second cooldown before we can gain sigils again. And faster attack speed means accelerated Lightfall sword accumulation, so this is just incredible. And truly, if you are debating between getting Eula Constellation 1 and picking up this weapon, I will always say go for the weapon as you get more bang for your buck. That is, unless you already have the Claymore we are about to talk about. As another great 5-star for Eula would be Skyward Pride. The energy recharge substat makes her bursts more frequent, and with how much damage it's capable of, you will definitely want it available to you more often than not. Also, the vacuum blades produced by her burst, normal and charge attacks also count as physical damage, which just makes this weapon so much fun to use. But be warned, the wind blades do not count towards Lightfall stacks. But you know what, picking between this weapon and the Song of Broken Pines comes down to preference, I feel. For that massive nuke, Pines is great, but for more consistency and damage from varying means, I feel like Skyward is the way to go. Wolf's Gravestone works just fine, but I wouldn't use it over the previous two. Either way, it is still an option all the same. As for 4 stars, I firstly want to cover the Snow Tomb Star Silver, which has a substat of physical damage percentage. When you hit an enemy with normal or charge attacks, you at base have a 60% chance of creating an Everfrost Icicle above them, which deals AoE physical damage equal to 80% of your attack. But beyond that, opponents affected by Cryo, which is anyone hit by her skills, are instead dealt 200%. And this can all occur once every 10 seconds, making it sort of like a less frequent Shattered Lightfall Sword, a very good weapon that is gacha free. Next up we have Luxurious Sea Lord, which provides a substat of attack percentage, and our elemental burst damage, which is already insane, is furthered by 12%. And when Eula's burst hits, we will have a School of Tuna flood in for 100% AoE attack damage, which can happen once every 15 seconds, which allows us to pad our burst damage a bit more. The prototype Archaic has a substat of attack percentage, and with it normal and charge attacks have a 50% chance to deal an additional 240% attack damage at base to enemies in a small AoE once every 15 seconds, another pseudo Shattered Lightfall Sword, which requires a bit more time. And then to emulate the benefits of Skyward Pride, we have Sacrificial Greatsword and its substat of energy recharge. It's not exactly outstanding, but if it's all you've got, it can work. But now let's head on over to artifacts. For Eula artifacts, on account of how important physical damage is for her, we'll want to be running 4-piece Pale Flame. At 2-piece, that is a 25% increase to physical damage. At 4-piece, when an elemental skill hits an opponent, attack is increased by 9% for 7 seconds. This can stack up to 2 times, bringing us to an additional 18% attack, and once we have 2 stacks, the aforementioned 2-piece bonus is increased by 100%, which brings us to a whopping 125% physical damage bonus. So at this point, we are absolutely swimming in this stuff. For her sands, we will want attack percentage. For her goblet, we will let our cup runneth over because we want more physical damage percentage. And finally, for her circlet, we will go either crit rate or crit damage. However, if we are able to achieve cryo resonance with our team composition, we may afford to ease up on our crit rate, leaving it at something like 55%. As for substats, attack percentage, crit rate, crit damage, and energy recharge can go a long way. If it wasn't for the Ito grind, I may have been able to upgrade my pieces, but for now, we roll with what we've got. And that is not to say that my Eula doesn't already steamroll as is, but that's all for our artifacts. It is time for team compositions. So Eula is more than anything else a main DPS, and so we will want to treat her as such and build around her accordingly. By far, the best elemental reaction we can hope to achieve for Eula would be Superconduct on account of its reduction to physical damage resistance. If you're energy deficient and need a battery for Eula, we can potentially pick up a cryo support, which will also add to our crit rate by 15% like stated previously. And finally, we'll probably want a shielder to limit our combo interruptions and any damage that would prevent us from nuking. And with all these things in mind, previously I went with Eula, Beidou, Fischl, and Zhongli. What was a pretty great, fun, and synergetic combination. If you are a free-to-play player, this can be a great option, but of course 2 5 stars is pretty steep, so we'll substitute Zhongli with someone like Xinyan, but build her to especially be a shielder. She was somewhat recently given away for free, so she should be available to plenty of players. Her skill, now that's rock and roll, makes it so that characters shielded by her receive a 15% increase to physical damage, and if you have her at Constellation 4, that very same skill furthermore decreases enemy physical damage resistance by 15% for 12 seconds. If you are considering adding another cryo character, I tend to mess around with either Diona or Rosaria. Now, call it a highly educated by the internet hunch, but I think Shenhe is going to be absurdly good with Eula as well. But yeah, previously I used Beidou and Fischl, but these days I much prefer to use Raiden and Fischl. The Raiden Shogun's elemental skill boosts the damage of Eula's elemental burst, and her elemental burst may be used while Eula is on cooldown to keep the crazy damage going, and she acts as a megawatt battery for her and the entire team as well. And if you'd like, you can substitute Fischl for Kujo Sara. That being said, if you don't have a bunch of constellations on Sara, I don't really think it's worth it despite the attack buffing, as it makes things a bit too tedious to get moving appropriately. Fischl is just really damn useful. Eula is a character that, despite being badmouthed a whole lot leading up to a release, is a character that has to me only gotten better with time. She is the face of physical damage and serves it pretty damn well. She is one of my favorite characters, and I really hope you enjoy your time using her. Or if you are still considering if she is worth picking up or not, I hope this video helped you come to a more informed decision. If you enjoy the content and want to see more, be sure to subscribe to Whalestat with notifications on as we dive deep into this amazing game together. That being said, I have been your host, Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.